Imagine a bird living in a golden cage. The bars are polished so well they look like sunlight. The floor is warmed, the food arrives on time, the water is always clear. And one day the bird hears a voice outside say, "You are free, look how well you are cared for." The bird tilts its head. It has never known hunger, never felt winter, never been chased. It has also never flown more than the length of its glittering prison. Here's the paradox that begins our walk together. The most effective form of control is the one that feels like comfort. We live in an age where chains rarely clank. They hum, they buzz, they come in sleek black rectangles we keep in our pockets. They arrive as subscriptions, incentives, and personalized experiences. And so the question, are the wealthy manipulating you, is not a question about villains twirling mustaches in candlelit rooms. It is a question about atmospheres, about whether systems of influence that shape what seems normal to desire, normal to fear, normal to believe. Let me say something careful and plain. Wealth itself is not evil. Money is a tool, like fire. It can warm a home or burn a village. The danger is not that some people are rich. The danger is that when a small group holds an enormous share of resources, they gain the ability to tilt the playing field of perception, not always by force, more often by suggestion, by making certain paths feel inevitable and others feel impossible. Think about it. If you wanted to steer a river, you would not argue with each droplet. You would shape the banks. You would carve the land so the water chooses the direction you prefer. Modern manipulation works like that. The wealthy don't need to command your mind if they can shape the conditions around it: your news, diet, your debt, your dreams, your sense of what success looks like, your fear of being left behind. And they rarely announce themselves as manipulators. They appear as benefactors, innovators, patrons of progress. They build platforms that connect us, then sell access to our attention. They design products that save time, then quietly teach us to spend that saved time inside their world. They fund stories about aspiration, about hustle, about rugged individual triumph, while the ladder they praise is missing rungs for most climbers. Yet the strange truth is this: manipulation is not only something done to us, it is a dance, a tango between external power and internal longing. If no one wanted the glamour, it couldn't seduce. If no one felt the ache of scarcity, it couldn't threaten. The wealthy pull strings, yes, but the strings attach to something real inside. Our need to matter, to belong, to feel safe in a world that seems to change faster than hearts can keep up. So don't begin with anger, begin with curiosity. When you feel a desire flare up, an upgrade, a status symbol, a new identity packaged as a product, ask softly, where did this want come from? When you feel fear spike about missing out, being replaced, falling behind, ask, who benefits from me feeling this urgent? These questions are small lanterns. You won't see the whole maze at once, but with enough lanterns, you stop walking in the dark. And maybe that is the real beginning of freedom, not the absence of influence, but the presence of awareness. Awareness, though, is not a single moment of revelation. It is a muscle. And the game of influence is clever precisely because it trains our attention to be weak, while selling us empowerment like a vitamin. So let's step closer to the machinery, not to become paranoid, but to become fluent. Picture your mind as a garden. Seeds of thought land there every day: headlines, images, jokes, trends, common sense. Some seeds you choose to plant. Many arrive on the wind. Now ask, who controls the wind? In earlier ages, it was priests, kings, village elders. Today, it is something more diffuse and more intimate. Algorithms, PR, think tanks, brands, influencers, and the quiet lobbyists of culture. The wealthy don't need to dictate each thought. They only need to ensure the dominant winds carry certain seeds more often than others. One of the oldest tricks in the book is to shape not your answers, but your questions. If you can decide what people are debating, you've already won half the war. Notice how often public conversations are framed as a narrow hallway. Is the problem lazy workers or high taxes? Is your suffering your fault or your mindset? Is the solution to buy this product or that one? When the hallway is narrow enough, even rebellion becomes a merchandise aisle. There's also the art of repetition. Your brain, like every Brain mistakes familiarity for truth. A lie whispered once is suspicious. A lie repeated 1,000 times becomes wallpaper. The wealthy can buy repetition. They can keep a narrative in the air long enough for it to feel like oxygen. Billionaires are job creators. The market is neutral. If you're struggling, you must not be trying hard enough. Are these always false? Not necessarily. But the question is, why are these the slogans we hear endlessly, while others about community, labor power, shared prosperity arrive as rare birds? And then there is the seduction of choice. Modern control loves to wear the mask of freedom. You are offered a buffet of options, but the chef has already decided the ingredients. Streaming services give you 10,000 shows, and yet the cultural agenda seems strangely uniform. Social media gives you endless voices, and yet certain opinions rise like cream while others sink without a trace. You can say anything, but the system decides what gets seen. It is like living in a city where every street is named your decision, while the map itself is owned by someone else. Don't underestimate the role of status. We are social creatures tuned to look for cues about what is admirable. If wealth can portray itself as virtue, then inequality becomes moral theater. The rich are smart, the poor are careless, the middle is one good hustle away. This story keeps the wheel turning because it turns your neighbors into competitors and your exhaustion into shame. A society that gaslights itself does not require many outside gaslighters. So if you want to tell whether you're being manipulated, begin to listen for the shape of the wind. Not just what is said, but what is repeated, what is rewarded, what is ridiculed, what is missing altogether. The absence of a seed can be as revealing as the presence of one. And when you listen for the wind long enough, you start to hear the notes playing underneath almost every modern melody: scarcity and spectacle. They are the twin drums of manipulation, and they beat in opposite directions while arriving as one song. Scarcity is the whisper in your ear that says, there isn't enough. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough security, not enough love. It is the old animal alarm dressed in a business suit. When people feel scarce, they become predictable. They will accept worse work, worse treatment, worse lives because fear makes any lifeboat look like a yacht. The wealthy understand this, often unconsciously, sometimes quite intentionally. A precarious population is an obedient population. If you are too busy surviving, you will not have the bandwidth to question why survival feels like a constant sprint. Look around. The most profitable systems are the ones that keep you just anxious, enough to keep buying, upgrading, proving. A limited time offer, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a countdown timer on a screen. Even your career is framed as a race with no finish line. You can almost hear the drum. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Scarcity doesn't just sell products. It sells a worldview in which peace is postponed until you reach some invisible summit. Then comes spectacle, the glittering distraction that says, look over here. The lavish lifestyle vlog, the celebrity scandal, the outrage headline engineered to spike your cortisol and steal your afternoon. Spectacle is not merely entertainment. It is a steering wheel for attention. The wealthy can endure criticism as long as they command the spotlight, because what we stare at becomes what we believe matters. If the stage is always occupied by the rich and famous, then their values feel like gravity, their problems feel universal, and their status feels like destiny. Here's how scarcity and spectacle collaborate. Scarcity makes you feel small and urgent. Spectacle tells you what escape looks like: a mansion, a perfect body, a brand that grants you a tribe. So you work harder, spend more, compare yourself endlessly, and every comparison is profitable. The economy of attention is not neutral. When your eyes are locked on fantasies of wealth, your own life becomes a waiting room. When your heart is yoked to anxiety, your political imagination shrinks. There's a quiet cruelty in this arrangement. It teaches you to blame yourself for systemic pain. If rent rises beyond reach or healthcare devours your paycheck, you are told to budget better. If work grinds you down, you are told to optimize your mindset. It's like being pushed underwater and then scolded for not breathing elegantly. A sign you're being manipulated is when your world feels like a treadmill surrounded by mirrors. You are running, sweating, exhausted while constantly seeing images of people who seem not to sweat at all. Scarcity powers the legs, spectacle hypnotizes the eyes, and the wealthy collect the electricity from both. But if we stop there at scarcity, at spectacle, we risk turning this into a simple tale of predators and prey. That story is comforting because it has clear villains and clean exits. Real life is messier. The wealthy can only manipulate what in us is already manipulable. That is not a blame. It is an invitation to look at the mirror without flinching. Consider how easily a hook finds its mouth. A fisherman does not invent hunger in the fish, he uses it. The hook is designed to match the appetite already swimming there. In the same way, systems of influence lean on our oldest human aches. To be admired, to be safe, to be seen as someone who made it. If you've ever felt the sting of being overlooked, if you've ever wondered whether you're enough, if you've ever feared falling out of the tribe, then you've felt the raw material manipulation is carved from. Sometimes the manipulation is loud. You know the ad is an ad. You know the influencer is selling you something. But the subtler kind happens through identity. We begin to use objects as mirrors because we're unsure of the face we were born with. A car becomes a proof of worth. A brand becomes a personality. A resume becomes a moral scorecard. The wealthy don't have to tell you to play this game. If the culture already equates price with value, we do it to each other. We learn to measure souls in market terms. We laugh at the loser who can't keep up. We praise the winner who never rests. And slowly, without anyone pointing a gun, a whole society internalizes the logic of hierarchy. Here's a painful confession many of us share. Sometimes we admire the very people we suspect are exploiting us, not because we're foolish, but because we're human. We are trained to associate wealth with competence, competence with safety, safety with love. The child in us thinks, if I can get close to the powerful, maybe I won't be hurt again. That child is not stupid, it is thirsty. Manipulation succeeds when it dresses itself as the parent we wished. We had dot, and then there is shame. Shame is the guard dog of the system. If you're ashamed of needing help, you won't demand a fair world. You'll demand private rescue. If you're ashamed of being tired, you won't question the grind. You'll question your character. Look carefully. Any ideology that turns collective problems into personal failures is an ideology that protects the wealthy because it makes you look downward at yourself, at your neighbors rather than upward at the structure. So the mirror trap is this. Not only are we influenced from outside, we begin to police ourselves from within. We become unpaid employees of the story. We push ourselves to exhaustion. We compete for crumbs. We curate our lives for approval. We do it because we want to be loved, because we want to feel real. And the tragedy is that the more we chase these manufactured mirrors, the farther we drift from the quiet, unmarketable truth of who we already are. Freedom starts when you notice which part of you is being played like an instrument. Not to hate that part, to hold it gently, to say, that's where the hook finds me. When you know where the hook finds you, you begin to see the line. And once you see the line, you can follow it back to the hand's dot. So what are the signs of the strings? One sign is language that turns complexity into a children's story. Listen for slogans that feel too neat for the tangled human world. The poor are poor because they choose to be. Anyone can make it if they work hard. Greed is good. These phrases are not arguments. They are spells. Their purpose is not to explain reality, but to enforce a mood, usually a mood that keeps power concentrated and guilt individualized. If a sentence makes you stop questioning, that sentence is suspect. Another sign is false binaries. The wealthy love a two-door hallway because while you're arguing about which door to choose, you forget to check for windows. You're either pro-business or anti-progress, either absolute freedom or total control. Either you consume this way or you don't belong. The world is wide, but manipulation shrinks it into a ping-pong table. A third sign is incentives hidden inside moral clothing. Watch for moments when what is good just happens to be what is profitable. A company tells you it cares about your health while selling sugar as happiness. A billionaire funds a charity that, conveniently, builds their reputation and shapes public policy without democratic scrutiny. A platform says it connects people. Yet its real product is your attention. None of this means every good deed is fake. It means you should ask, does the virtue point toward the same pocket every time? Then there is manufactured urgency. If you're constantly rushed into debt, into outrage, into purchases, into hustle, your ability to think deeply collapses. Urgency is a solvent that dissolves discernment. The moment you feel panic to decide, pause. Manipulation hates the pause. It lives in the gap between stimulus and reflection, where your nervous system can be hijacked like a car left running. Also notice who you're trained to blame. If the story of your suffering always points sideways or downward, immigrants, the poor, the young, the old, lazy workers, woke elites, whatever your era's favorite scapegoat is, ask why the finger never points at the architecture of wealth itself. A society fighting itself is a society that cannot look at the throne. Now, how do you slip the strings? Not by pretending you're above influence. That's another trap. You slip them by building inner and outer counterweights. Inner counterweights. Practice naming your desires before obeying them. I want this. Why? Sit with the discomfort long enough for it to speak. Some wants are yours. Some are planted. Time reveals the difference. Train your attention like a monk trains breath. Returning, returning, returning. The more present you are, the less rentable your mind becomes. Outer counterweights. Choose communities and media that widen your world instead of narrowing it. Follow people who complicate you, not just those who confirm you. Learn how power works. Labor history, advertising psychology, basic economics. Not to become cynical, but to become literate. A literate mind is harder to puppet. The goal isn't to live suspicion first. The goal is to live clarity first. To become the kind of person who can enjoy beauty without worshiping its price tag. Who can admire success without mistaking it for moral proof. Who can feel fear without letting fear vote on their behalf. And when you start living clarity first, something almost humorous happens. The world doesn't suddenly become pure. The wealthy don't vanish into a puff of ethical awareness. The algorithms don't apologize and turn into gentle librarians. No life remains the same forest. But you stop walking through it as a sleepwalker. You begin to notice that manipulation truly depends on a strange bargain. It offers you a borrowed self in exchange for your real one. It says, wear this identity, buy this belonging, chase this ladder, fear this enemy, worship this clock, and in return it promises what every human heart wants: safety, significance, love. The tragedy is that the promise is always conditional. Love if you perform, safety if you comply, significance if you keep consuming the symbols of it. It is a deal that never finishes paying out. A well that sweetens your thirst while keeping you thirsty. But there is another kind of wealth the manipulators cannot mint. It is the wealth of being unrushable. The wealth of a nervous system that can feel a headline and not be yanked by it. The wealth of a friendship that doesn't require proving. The wealth of time spent with a child, a garden, a craft, a silence. The wealth of saying, this is enough for today. In a world that profits from your perpetual dissatisfaction, this is why the deepest rebellion is not rage, though rage has its season. The deepest rebellion is presence, because a present person makes different choices. They don't buy to anesthetize, they buy to use. They don't work to impress, they work to contribute. They don't scroll to escape their life, they scroll with a question in hand. The manipulators of any era fear the person who can sit still without feeling empty. Such a person is no one's captive market. And notice the irony. To see the wealthy clearly, you must let go of being enthralled by them, whether through hatred or adoration. Hatred is still a form of orbit. So is envy. Both keep your eyes on their stage. Freedom is when your gaze returns to your own ground, your own people, your own values, and you start asking a more ancient question than who is manipulating me. You ask, what kind of life is worth living? Power will always exist. Some will always have more than others. The question is not whether influence disappears. The question is whether your inner compass belongs to you. When you reclaim that compass, the wealthy become what they really are: human beings inside a system, not gods above it, capable of creativity and cruelty, generosity and greed. You can learn from them without kneeling. You can criticize them without being consumed. You can build alternatives without waiting for their permission. So as we close, take a breath. Feel your body in the chair, your feet on the floor, your eyes behind your eyes. Remember the bird in the golden cage. The door was never locked. It was only unimagined. May you imagine it now. May you step out softly, not into another prison made of slogans, but into the wild air of your own attention. May your wants become honest. May your fears become teachers instead of masters. May you see the wind and still choose your direction.